Greetings movie enthusiasts. So keeping with the Halloween theme, today's video is my top 6 vampire movies. Vampire movies have been around since the dawn of cinema. Books have been written about them, plays have been made about them, and of course there is countless works of art depicting them throughout time. So for the purpose of this video, I had to try and find a way to pick my top 6 in a way that puts them on an even playing field, which is difficult because there are so many variations. Ultimately, the decision was surprisingly easy. My top 6 are based solely on mythology. Which films have the strongest sense of mythology made it into the top 6. So let's start the list. Number 6, Interview with the Vampire. Interview with the Vampire is a 1994 drama horror film directed by Neil Jordan. It's based on the 1976 novel Interview with the Vampire written by Anne Rice. The film tells the story of Louis, played by Brad Pitt, and his transformation and life as a vampire at the hands of his maker Lestat, played by Tom Cruise. It chronicles their time together and the addition of a 12-year-old girl, Claudia, played by Kirsten Dunst, into their immortal family. The film is definitely a go-to when it comes to watching good vampire movies. What I love most about this film is its journey through history and how the characters learn to adapt and assimilate into each time period. The vampires in this film, while the history of their species is very much unknown, they still have a strong sense of culture and they have their own rules, such as you can't kill your own kind. There's this underlying theme of family. Each character in their own way is trying to find a way to stop their loneliness. In a funny way, I think it was unintentionally progressive. You had two men raising and looking after a little girl, both being her parents. While they weren't the best role models, it sent an interesting message. Number 5, Queen of the Damned. Queen of the Damned is a 2002 horror film directed by Michael Roma. It is loosely adapted from both the novels The Vampire Lestat and The Queen of the Damned by Anne Rice. The film follows Lestat, played by Stuart Townsend, who has awakened from decades of sleep to become a rock star, which in turn awakens the vampire queen Akasha, played by Elia. I'm not ashamed to say that I enjoy this film. It has that cliche gothic vampire look. Having this vampire become a rock god kind of shows how in both worlds, whether you're a rock star or a vampire, the title is very sexualized and you become wanted by everyone. Put the two together and people are doing far more than offering up their underwear, they're handing over their immortal souls. I absolutely love the soundtrack to this film, it's one of my favorites. The film is dedicated to Elia's memory due to it being released after her death. It's weird how both this film and Interview with the Vampire came from the same Vampire Chronicles series by Anne Rice, and yet both films have nothing in common. They are separate entities. While this film has a little more of a backstory or an understanding of vampires and their origins, especially by introducing the vampire queen Akasha, it still doesn't flesh out anywhere near as much of the mythology as the books do, but I felt it gives me enough to keep me satisfied. Number 4, Van Helsing. Van Helsing is a 2004 dark fantasy action-adventure film directed by Stephen Sommers. The film follows monster hunter Van Helsing, played by Hugh Jackman, who has been sent by the Vatican to help Anna Valeris, played by Kate Beckinsale, and her bloodline by defeating Count Dracula, played by Richard Roxburgh. The film is a tribute to horror monster films from the 1930s and 40s. I have to admit, it took a couple watches before some of the pieces fit together. There is a lot of backstory and mythology in this film, but I don't feel like it was fleshed out or as obvious as it should have been. It took me several goes before I understood that Van Helsing was actually the Archangel Gabriel, the left hand of God, and that he, or is it right hand of God? Whichever. And that he lost his memory and all this stuff as part of his punishment by God for killing Dracula. So he kind of started the whole thing. I still love this movie. It's fun, it's fantasy, it combines all the monster classics in such a cohesive way that it's quite brilliant. The costumes and score are also brilliant. I enjoy watching this pretty often. Number 3, Underworld series. Underworld is a series of action horror films that tell the story of an eternal feud between vampires and Lycans. The films consist of 2003's Underworld, 2006's Underworld Evolution, 2009's Underworld Rise of the Lycans, and 2012's Underworld Awakening. 3 of the 4 films centre around death dealer and vampire Selene, played by Kate Beckinsale. The 5th installment, Underworld Blood Wars, is set to be released in January. Of the films listed so far, the Underworld series has the most fleshed out mythology. We learn the origin of vampires and the Lycans. The origin being that there were immortal twin brothers, Marcus Corvinus and William Corvinus. William was bitten by a wolf, and in mixing with his immortal DNA turned him into the first Lycan. Marcus was bitten by a bat, and when it mixed with his immortal DNA, he became the first vampire, but only Marcus had control over his form. So that was all pretty well explained, and the stories branch out from that in interesting ways, especially in Rise of the Lycans, when we really learn how the feud between the species started. The only issue is, you have those answers, but when you look at the start of the line, their father, Alexander Corvinus, you're left still asking, how did he become the first immortal? And so that's one aspect that hasn't been explained yet. Nevertheless, I love this series, and I can't wait for the next one. Number 2, Dracula Untold. Dracula Untold is a 2014 dark fantasy action horror film directed by Gary Shaw and starring Luke Evans as Dracula. The film tells the origin story of Count Dracula, his reign as Vlad the Impaler, and his introduction to vampirism. This is definitely my favourite origin story when it comes to the world of vampires. It's very detailed and thought out and focuses on that time period. In most films, the origin stories are brief and inserted into the film as a flashback. So I enjoy that this film focuses completely on Dracula's origins and shows plenty of time of him as a human, because it adds more progression to the story and makes for more entertainment. The only downside is, like with Underworld, you can trace everything back to one particular person, but then you're left not knowing how that person became what they are. Number 1. Bram Stoker's Dracula. Bram Stoker's Dracula, or just Dracula, is a 1992 romantic horror film directed by Francis Ford Coppola. The film is based on the novel Dracula by Bram Stoker and stars Gary Oldman as Dracula, Winona Ryder as Mina Harker, Anthony Hopkins as Abraham Van Helsing, and Keanu Reeves as Jonathan Harker. This is my number 1 favourite vampire film, and one of my favourite films in general. Has been since before I was old enough to even understand what it was really about. I love that while yes, it has vampires in it, it's not really a vampire film. The main plot of the film has far more focus on this tragic love story going on, and the vampire story is used to put more emphasis on the love story. It shows that their love was so deep and true that it was eternal and lasted beyond death. Dracula's story is a sad tale, and while yes, he's a monster, the monster part is a reflection of his grief. He was a warrior and he served his god and his people, and in the end it cost him his true love. And in that moment he felt God had not only abandoned him but betrayed him, for not just taking his love but damning her soul. And it's in that moment he condemns God and becomes the monster we know him to be. So we do know his origin, it's shown on screen, and then the tone of that is present throughout the whole film. It's such a beautiful and sad film, and Gary Oldman's performance was just phenomenal and so powerful. The mythology itself is very straightforward and doesn't leave you with more questions. Now, here are some honourable mentions. These are some vampire films I have enjoyed over the years but didn't make the top 6 due to little to no sense of vampire mythology.
Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil.
Your words mean nothing to me, priest.
For thou art with me.
I know what you are.
Say it out loud.
Vampire.
What's your name?
Buffy.
Rebel.
You threw a knife at my head.
Yes, I had to show you.
But you threw a knife at my head.
And you caught it. Only the chosen one could have caught it.
Come on. Interesting. I've been stabbed, and I've been hanged, and I've been burned. Even broken on the rack once, but I've never been shot before. Kind of itches a little.
For heaven's sake, who in all of England, by the very furthest stretch of the imagination, could possibly be a vampire?
I am Count... Dracula.
You met Blade. Daywalker. Now, what's behind door number 1?
Can't tell you. They'll kill me.
Kill you, motherfucker! I'll kill you! I'll just enjoy it better. What do you want?
I want to be alive again.
You can't. Ask yourself, what do you want now?
I want to stop them from doing this to anyone else. One more thing. See you in hell. Now I feel bad.
Get out there and find me a virgin.
Please don't bite my buttons.
Ow!
It's some birthday party, bro.
Yeah, well, 10:35 10 times. Birthdays are pointless.
Let's have a drink.
Smells human.
100% pure. That's one of the perks of serving your country.
So there you have my top 6. If there's a vampire film that you like that's not on this list, let me know in the comments below. You can also let me know via social media, links are in the description box below. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Until next time.